Boxie, Boxie, it is magic time. We have guests. Hi, everybody. This is Larry Harnisch with the Ask Me Anything on the Black Dahlia case for April 2024. Boxie, as you probably know, is the Los Angeles County District Attorney's files in the Black Dahlia case. Um, Before we get going, I need to say this. I've had a lot of problems. Maybe you've noticed, maybe not, with the video being out of sync with the audio on YouTube. I don't know why. I switched computers, hoping that would fix it, and the computer wouldn't recognize the webcam. So I'm back on the old computer, and I will troubleshoot that later. Um, all the kind of stuff, just kind of behind the scenes stuff. Anyway, everything seems to be working right now, which is great. Um, okay. I do the Ask Me Anything on the Black Dahlia case the first Tuesday of the month at 10 a.m. Pacific time. And in case you're new, the reason I do the Ask Me Anythings is I got really tired of the low quality of true crime shows and podcasts. This is only Black Dahlia questions. I started another Ask Me Anything on George Hodel and Steve Hodel because I kept getting so many questions. So the George Hodel, Steve Hodel Ask Me Anything is the third Tuesday of the month. In this case, it's going to be April 16th. So today, only Dahlia questions, and I have a lot. I have to say I have a lot. I will warn you now, I won't get to everything. I was going through the questions that people have sent me and the backlog, and I can tell you now, there's no way that I can get to those questions and do them any justice. So I will do my best, as always. I usually get a troll. I am not shy about reporting them. You report them too. If you see them show up, I don't tolerate any harassment. Now, the way this works is I will discuss an issue for a couple of minutes. If it's a complicated issue, it will be more than a couple of minutes. And then I will alternate between the live questions in the chat and the submitted questions. And again, I have a lot of submitted questions. And I should mention, in case you're wondering, what is Larry Harnisch looking at? Because you probably notice I'm looking all over the place. I'm looking at the chat, I'm looking at Instagram, and I will confess I'm looking at my cheat sheet. So if you're wondering what is going on with Larry Harnisch, can't he just sit and look at the? I'm busy. I'm looking at all this stuff. So that's what's going on with Larry Harnisch. Anyway, the next Dahlia session is going to be May 7th, 2024 at 10 a.m. Pacific time on YouTube and Instagram. Okay, I always start with a report on the book. As of Friday, I am at 147,000 words. I finished part one, which is the life of Elizabeth Short. And right now I am going, right now I'm looking at the crime scene on South Norton Avenue as it was. I went over the interview I did with Betty Bersinger, Betty and her late husband John, in 1996, and then I've got the interview with Wayne Fitzgerald, who was the first police officer at the crime scene. He and his partner Frank Perkins were the first two guys, the first two officers at the crime scene. And contrary to Will Fowler's story, he wasn't there. There was nobody there. Anyway, so that's where I am on the book right now. It's Wayne Fitzgerald and Frank Perkins. So before we get going, I want to talk a little bit about, there was an article in Popular Mechanics about the Black Dahlia case. And I was going to do share screen, but I'm having so many technical gremlins that I am not going to do that. I wish I could. I put the link I'll put the link in after this is done. But the thing about, first of all, the big question is, why is Popular Mechanics writing about the Black Dahlia case? Why are they doing true crime at all? And it kind of feeds into my sort of underlying contention that true crime is broken and everybody is doing it. and not always real well. Um, and that's kind of my main bone of contention with the Popular Mechanics article. Um, they should be reviewing products or telling you how to, DIY, how to refinish furniture, stuff like that. I think true crime is a little bit out of, I don't know, but it was curious because it was done in partnership with Biography, which also has a lot of true crime stuff, and the article refers to previously previously published articles on the Black Dahlia case, and you have to really hunt around the Biography website to find them. Anyway, um, the thing, the reason I want to single out this article, besides the fact that it's in Popular Mechanics, is just the nature of true crime. Is true crime broken? As I said, I think that's kind of my underlying contention: is true crime is broken. This particular article, not particularly accurate, but it's done as so many articles are on kind of the model of the junior high school term paper, where you get so many books and so many newspaper articles and you run them through a blender. And at least with the Black Dahlia case, you have to be very, very careful what sources you use. And this particular article was very odd in one sense, in that it veered off into Westerns. It got into the Wild Wild West and Wyatt Earp and all that kind of thing. And it's like, how is any of that related to the Black Dahlia? I mean, it felt like padding. Um, I don't know. I don't know if the writer had a word requirement. He had to hit so many words or whatever, but it really felt like padding. Um, and again, some of the sources, one really needs to be critical in the books. If First of all the books are terrible, um, but just sort of indiscriminately, well, such and such is in this book, such and such is in that book. Yeah, maybe, but that doesn't matter. Anyway, and somebody asked, if you go through and look at the article in Popular Mechanics, you will see there's a photo of the envelope of Elizabeth Short's things that were mailed to the Examiner and other newspapers. And somebody was asking about, let's see, what was it? Oh, yes, the newspaper article. There's the newspaper article about, it's an obituary on Matt Gordon, Elizabeth Short's fiance. And I think someone asked, how did she get that? Presumably that was sent to her by his family. She was in contact with his mother and other family members. And so presumably they sent it to her. Regardless of the 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 Gordon family kind of backpedaled later on their engagement. Elizabeth Short and Matt Gordon were engaged for sure, but after he died, then um, they sort of retreated on that. And someone asked, did she ever know or suspect that Matt Gordon committed suicide? No, no. Even among, I interviewed Matt Gordon's fellow flyers in the Air Commandos, and you have to remember that there was, in those days, we're talking about the 1940s, there was a stigma about suicide, and so it was sort of a closed secret, or a closely kept secret, that he committed suicide, but he did. Whether she ever suspected it, I can't imagine that she would have known that. I imagine she would have been even more devastated had she known that. So there are other things I could say about the Popular Mechanics article, but you're smart folks. Read it over, see what you think. The other thing I want to talk about is Wikipedia. Um, I don't. I only read Wikipedia for amusement. I do read the Black Dahlia entries. I never ever post any. Well, I do post one thing. Every so often in Black Dahlia Suspects, someone will revive this prank post. There was a guy named Jacob Edward Fisk who was added to the list of suspects for one day and then deleted immediately many years ago. I forget when it was. It was quite a while ago. But every so often, someone will go back and restore that. And so I will remove that. But otherwise, I don't touch it. It's just sort of my little laboratory. But lately, there has been a guy named a Wikipedian using the handle Dr. Death. And Dr. Death is just laying waste to the Wikipedia entries on the Black Dahlia. Lots of bad faith edits, lots of vandalism. He's actually Dr. Death too. He got banned for destructive edits before, so he's on his second profile. But that's the nature of Wikipedia. Anyway, I don't have a lot to say about Wikipedia. If you really want to know, go through the history of the Wikipedia articles on the Black Dahlia or the Black Dahlia Suspect, and you'll see how much this Dr. Death has deleted. He just took an axe to some of these entries. So, and that's okay. Those are my two. I don't know. I don't know who colorized her photo. Okay. If you don't follow Wikipedia, and again, I only read it. I gave up years ago writing anything on Wikipedia. I only read it for amusement. It is my little laboratory. I like to keep sort of my finger on the pulse of what's happening in Dahlia land. And so I will check in with the Wikipedia article just to see what people have done to it. And there's an info box in Wikipedia. And there's the very familiar picture of Elizabeth Short. Well, somebody substituted it out and put it for a colorized one. And it was there for, I don't know, 4, 5, 6 months. And then somebody wiped it out and put the black and white portrait back in. I don't know. I only read Wikipedia. I am totally hands off, but it is interesting to watch. It's sort of like my little petri dish of what's going on in Black Dahlia land. And it quotes me, sometimes I'm in, sometimes I'm out. I don't care. To me, it's just all amusing. And with that, let's go to chat and see one of the live questions here. Let's see here. I think Adrian has a question. Could any early hand-printed communication to the Los Angeles Examiner come from the killer? Okay. Now, if you are over in Steve Hodel land, all of the letters, all the mail, it all came, hey Sheila, all the letters came from his dad, who was taunting the police. In fact, right, that's Dr. Death too. Dr. Death, Death Editor, I beg your pardon. Death Editor 2 was the reincarnation of Death Editor 1. You're on your, are you Death Editor 2? That would be amusing. Anyway, let's see. Oh yeah. If you are Steve Hodel, all of the handwritten, all the crackpot mail is from his dad. It's all taunting the police. In reality, which is where we live, the only communication that was considered really from the killer was the very first mailing. It was a little itty bitty envelope addressed with cutout newspaper letters. And that was, they knew that was from the killer because it had material from her purse. Other than that, probably all crackpot mail. There's a lot of crackpot mail. And it's just bonkers. There's a lot of it. Some of it is in Boxie. So yeah, but the only legitimate one is the original. And somebody asked me, while I'm on the subject of the envelope, somebody asked, well, if they saved all the evidence, what became of that? Well, really, there isn't a lot of evidence. The envelope is variously described as a box, a package, a manila envelope. No, it is. I have a sample. It's about the size of a CD case. It's about like that. The technical term, since you want to know, is a monarch. It's a monarch envelope. And you can figure out the size of it because there's a stamp on there. And you can calculate using the size of the stamp, you can calculate the dimensions of the envelope. And it's not that big. Um, so uh, anyway, what became of that is um, it was disassembled by the crime lab. Um, it was analyzed, and where the pieces of it are now is unclear. It may last seen at the crime lab, the LAPD crime lab, and maybe it was there. The contents of the envelope, that also is unclear. It's entirely possible that some of the Black Dahlia material was returned to her family. Um, so there's reason to believe that when the investigators were done with it, it was returned to the um, yeah. Um, that was what was that it was some of the things were returned to the family. Presumably, some of it is still in the file cabinet at robbery homicide. Presumably. Okay, let's see here. I'm going to do something different. I take questions alphabetically, and I always start in the A's. I'm going to start with the end of the alphabet and work backwards. Which is Boxie discusses um, a different woman with the same name, Elizabeth Short. In police reports or witness interviews, did this create investigation issues and misinformation? I don't remember. I think there was another woman named Elizabeth Short in Los Angeles at the time. I'm not positive. There was a guy named Richard Short, and he was investigated. He absolutely had nothing at all to do with the Black Dahlia case, but there was a guy named Richard Short for sure. And I think he must have had some sort of police record. I forget now, but there are mugshots of him in Boxie. So yeah, no, okay. What do we got here? Hand printed. The FBI file. Yeah, Danielle, the FBI file, people think, oh, wow, the FBI file. And the FBI file had really a very small role in the Black Dahlia case. They conducted a few interviews on behalf of the LAPD, so the department didn't have to send investigators out of town, and that was somewhat common. They interviewed a couple of people in Chicago. They interviewed Peter Vetcher, and I forget where he was, but they did an interview with him. But beyond, and the LAPD sent some material to the FBI crime lab for investigation because the LAPD crime lab was more sophisticated than the LAPD crime lab in those days. And so the LAPD crime lab, if you read the FBI file carefully, you'll see that the FBI analyzed her body was scrubbed. And so they analyzed the bristles that were found on her body. They did that. And other than that, it's a lot of behind the scenes of the FBI playing off the different newspapers against each other, depending on how friendly they were to the Bureau and that sort of thing. There's a lot of that. The only really useful thing in the FBI file would be the newspaper articles. The FBI, because it wasn't an FBI case, the FBI did had kind of a clipping service, and so there's a lot of clippings on the Black Dahlia case in the FBI files. Other than that, it's not really very valuable. And I would caution anybody. There used to be, and I don't know lately, I don't check all things Dahlia, but there used to be somebody who was selling the FBI file on eBay, because that's how eBay is. You can download it for free at the FBI. It's FOIA, FBI.gov. They have a reading room. And there were two versions of it. The previous version was highly redacted. They have uncensored a lot more of it this time. But you can download it for nothing. if you want to. Um, okay, let's see here. We did that question. Okay. The inside jacket of Eatwell's book states that Short's notebook address book was inscribed with the name Mark Hansen of the city's most notorious and corrupt businessman. Was he really? I imagine there were a lot of corrupt businessmen in town, but really, Mark Hansen was at the top? No, no. Mark Hansen was a nightclub operator who ran. He was involved in the Florentine Gardens, a somewhat silent partner. Um, he was in the movie theater business. He ran a couple of independent movie theaters, like the Marcal, which was on Hollywood Boulevard. And for most of the time that Elizabeth Short was in Los Angeles, the Marcal ran The Outlaw, the famous Jane Russell movie, the Howard Hughes spectacular, The Outlaw. And so that was mostly what he did. He had, beyond that, not really much. There is a lot of desire to sort of inflate him into a much more mobbed up, influential guy. Nah, a minor player. And the Florentine Gardens was really second rate compared to Earl Carroll's, places like that. The Florentine Gardens was really minor stuff. So no, in that respect. Let's see. In my opinion, who's the most likely suspect? Well, this is how I answer that question. Before you decide who the suspects are, you have to decide who the suspects are not, and you have to eliminate the people who have been put forward, and not in all the kooky books because that would be a life's work, but in reality, Red Manley didn't do it. Mark Hansen didn't do it. And some of the other folk, Carl Balsinger, no, we can eliminate him. Patrick O'Reilly, folks, he's a non-starter. Sorry. So you have to eliminate all, and definitely not George Hodel. He was eliminated after 5.5 weeks, and that leaves us with Walter Bailey. He checks more boxes than anyone else in that he had lived a block from the crime scene. His family knew the family of Elizabeth Short. Now, we don't know that Walter Bailey and Elizabeth Short ever met. We don't know that. We can speculate, but we don't have any positive proof that happened. But we do know for absolute sure that her older sister, Virginia, knew the Bailey family, and knew especially Bailey's daughter, Barbara. I have pictures of them together. Barbara was the matron of honor at Virginia Short's wedding. So yeah, there is a connection, and there was an ongoing connection, not just from the wedding of Adrian West and Virginia Short, but later on, through the courtesy of Virginia Short's family. I have photographs of Virginia Short and Adrian West with Barbara. So yeah, they stayed in touch. So that ties things a little bit closer together. Walter Bailey, of all the people who have been put forward, Walter Bailey actually was a surgeon. He actually could have done what was done to her. The other folks, no. And again, I was going over the Black Dahlia crime scene photos recently, and the precision. I mean, it is the crime scene photos are this strange mix of just doing something absolutely insane. What was done to Elizabeth Short was insane, but in a very controlled manner. It seems contradictory. You're doing this crazy thing, but you're doing it in an utterly controlled and utterly, perfectly executed way. It's bizarre. It is a bizarre way to do it, but that's what the crime scene photos show. Um, it's a terrible thing. And so, on the basis of all of that, on the basis of his professional background, on the basis of we know, um, because it was in the papers and also in legal proceedings, that he had some secret. We know he had some secret. We don't know necessarily what it was, but he did have a secret. And according to his wife, his Walter Bailey's partner learned this secret. And every time he threatened to leave his partner and go back to his wife, because that's what he had done, this partner threatened to expose him and ruin him. So, what the secret was, I don't know, but he had one, and his partner knew it. So, of all the people who have been put forward, um, I think you'll have to agree that Walter Bailey checks the most boxes. Someone asked um, about suing for, libel or slander or whatever. It's like, no, you can't slander dead people. You can't libel dead people. He's dead, um, and that is why you can have all these tell-all books about conveniently dead Hollywood celebrities, because you can't libel a dead person in American law. So that's how it is. Okay. Let's see. Do I think that more than one person was involved in the actual murder? Um, I will have to defer to John Douglas. And let me say this about John Douglas. John Douglas is brilliant. John Douglas, as I suppose you all know, is the mind hunter, the criminal profiler. I was very fortunate in being able to talk to John Douglas at length about the Black Dahlia case. And he was pretty certain that it was one person. Now, later on, he wrote Cases That Haunt Us. Um, and that is garbage in, garbage out. I mean, I gave John Douglas really good information. It was the best I had. Um, and then he or his co-author, which is what I suspect, um, went to Severed, got a bunch of stuff. So you really have to be careful about John Douglas's books. He is a brilliant man. I have to say that. But the books, based on his treatment of the Black Dahlia case in Cases That Haunt Us, it's like, yeah, I don't know about his books, but one to one, brilliant. The man is brilliant. Anyway, he thought it was his opinion was it was one guy. And I'll have to quote the Hell's Angels folks. Two can keep a secret if one is dead. That's kind of their philosophy. I think it was a one person deal. I really think it was a one person deal. Okay. Over here on Instagram, in Severed, it says Elizabeth Short worked at the Hollywood Canteen. Is that true? No. Most of Severed is, my line on Severed is 25% mistakes and 50% fiction. It does say that. And the reason the late John Gilmore says that is because he wanted to tie it into the murder of Georgette Bauerdorf. I don't know. Now that John Gilmore is dead, the publisher has gone back. So I'm told, because I'm not going to read it again, but I'm told that the publisher is going back and fixing some of John Gilmore's worst mistakes. But Gilmore, at a certain point in the book, he just abandons any kind of timeline. He won't tell you when stuff is happening. It's just whatever, because he's John Gilmore. The reality is that the Hollywood Canteen went out of business before Elizabeth Short ever got to Los Angeles. So no, she did not meet anybody at the Hollywood Canteen. It was closed. And again, let me point out, the Hollywood Canteen was for enlisted men. No officers were allowed. So Major Matt Gordon wouldn't have been allowed. He wouldn't have been allowed in. No, it didn't happen. That is just more John Gilmore BS. Let's see. But thank you for the question. I always love to bash on John Gilmore. Let's see. Sometimes it seems as though the Black Dahlia case hinged on the secret question. I may be opening myself up for ridicule, but why should anyone think that the secret question mattered? If a suspect was questioned, they would have been under no obligation to describe the murder or confess to anything. A false confessor could have been cagey as well, saying they preferred not to describe certain things. In other words, plenty of violent killers have gone to prison without saying they did anything, and some who did talk have only admitted to a portion of what was alleged or not at all. For all that matters, they had an unnamed partner or they blacked out. Yeah. Now, that brings up an interesting point, which is what are the secret questions like in general? The key question. Sometimes they're called the key questions or the polygraph questions, that kind of thing. And the investigators, the police, typically in a big case, they will hold back some information that only they know and that only the killer would know. And it would be up to the skill of the investigator to to get the question in a way that the suspect being interviewed wouldn't know it was a secret question. They don't know. The investigator is going to, let me ask you one of the secret questions. They're going to drop it in if they're smart. And homicide investigators are generally the cream of the crop. If they're good interviewers, they're going to just drop that in there. But there was an interesting case of Joseph Dumais. I think he was a sergeant at Fort Dix who confessed to the Black Dahlia case, and he was a hot suspect. He was in New Jersey, and they knew that he was not in LA at the time. He couldn't have done it. But it's an excellent example because the LAPD didn't go back and interview him. They let Army, I don't know if it was the MPs or whatever, but the Army questioned Dumais. And when you look at that in some detail, you'll see that it's an excellent example of a suspect who is learning from interrogators, and he is getting better and better at answering questions as the process goes on. It's really it is a phenomenon. Suspects will do that where they learn from the interrogation and they give better answers. It is a phenomenon of human nature. Okay. Any chance of DNA testing in this case? I get the DNA question somewhat often. And of course, the question is, what are you going to test and who are you going to compare it to? We all know about the Golden State Killer, and that was a brilliant use of DNA. If there's not a lot of evidence in the Black Dahlia case. The envelope would be interesting, but again, first of all, it's unclear where it is. But more important, you don't know how many people have handled it besides the killer. Remember, the envelope went through the Postal Service. So, you've got how many people handled that envelope, from the time it went in the mailbox and was sorted and all that kind of thing. You don't know whose fingerprints, whose DNA might be on it. I believe they found a pretty good fingerprint on there. It was addressed with cutout letters, and there's one like big headline, like here is. I think it's the here is, and I think they found, or they thought they found, some sort of fingerprint on that. But again, it was. You can see if you look at the image in the image in the Popular Mechanics article, you can see the fingerprint dust. They have dusted the envelope for fingerprints. So what is left? Hypothetically, maybe the killer licked the envelope, licked the stamp, maybe. But whether they're far enough along to get DNA off a stamp from 1947 or an envelope, I don't know. Depending on where the envelope is. And again, The LAPD's mission is to arrest and convict killers who can be sent to prison. They're never going to get an arrest and a conviction in the Black Dahlia case. It would just be sort of satisfy everybody's curiosity. So that will probably never happen. Let's see. Okay. Hello, Instagram folks. Okay. What was Elizabeth Short's purpose in coming to Los Angeles? She came to Los Angeles to see if she could rekindle a relationship with Gordon Fickling. He was stationed in Long Beach at the time. He was in the Ferry FERRY command, and he was they were making airplanes down in Long Beach, and his job was to fly airplanes to their destinations. He had been a flight instructor, that sort of thing. I don't think Fickling was ever overseas, but anyway, that was his job. And so she came out. They met in Florida when he was, I think he was a flight instructor in Florida, and they met when she was out there. And then after Matt Gordon died, they sort of tried to get back together again. There are a lot of fairly passionate letters that were published in the newspapers. When I interviewed Gordon Fickling, he did what anybody, and this is really the mark of anybody who actually knew Elizabeth Short, they minimized that relationship as much as possible. And when I talked to Fickling, it's like, I barely knew the lady. She was, she liked to go dancing, but in terms of what was her favorite music, what was her favorite song, nothing. Stonewall. He's not going to tell you that. And somebody asked, one of the questions is, did Gordon Fickling feel contrite over what happened to her? No, he was done with her. They said their goodbyes, and he went back. He was back in North Carolina flying for an airline when she was killed. So he was pretty much done with her. Let's see. How many non-Steve Beatty authors have gone after you? I imagine P.U. Eatwell doesn't care for you. Oh, that's an interesting question. Gilmore hated me, it really pleased me to put that. I wrote an obituary for him for the LA Review of Books that he hated me, and nothing pleased me more than being hated by John Gilmore. But he was really a Bush League fraudster compared to Steve Hodel. Steve Hodel just blew him out of the water with Steve's frauds. P.U. Wheatwell has kind of left me alone. It's, and the interesting thing about P.U. Wheatwell is she's moved on. She has moved on. Nobody goes to her, as far as I know, to do the interviews and the podcast and that kind of. I think she did a few to promote the book, and then I think she's kind of moved on. Unlike Gilmore was sort of a perennial, and he wrote other books as well. But I mean, the one who has really spent the last 20 plus years of his life tying himself to the Dahlia case is Steve Hodel. So I think of all of them, Steve Hodel has been the most insistent. Okay. What here? Again, let's see here. Where are we? Okay. Now, someone read the Popular Mechanics article, and it says it refers to Westerns. So relevant to the Black Dahlia case is Westerns, and it refers to My Darling Clementine. And do you think that psychopaths go to, it's like, no. I mean, this is just, as I said, I think it's just the author padding the article with irrelevant but interesting stuff. I mean, it is interesting that Wyatt Earp lived in LA and became, like everyone in Los Angeles, became a real estate salesman. That's kind of interesting. Yeah, Wyatt Earp, after his early years in Tombstone, came to Los Angeles and was a real estate guy. That is true. But it is totally irrelevant. Okay, let's see here. Okay, now I have a whole lot of questions from somebody, so I'm going to skip them. You know who you are, and go back, because I could do a whole Ask Me Anything on just questions from this one individual. So I am going to skip ahead here. Let's see. As I said, a lot of questions. Okay. Okay. Oh, this is an interesting question. I would like to know where Elizabeth Short's father was working when he lived in Los Angeles. He lived and passed away in Huntington Park, a suburb of LA, where I believe he met my grandmother at the Wrigley Corporation packaging K rations during the war, circa 1943-44. Okay. What I know about Cleo Short is this, and I will preface this by saying this is my interest in Cleo Short. My interest in Cleo Short is he abandoned the family. What did he do after he abandoned the family? Where was he? What did he do in kind of what he did in Los Angeles? But I mean, the main question is, did he kill Elizabeth Short? And the answer is no, he didn't. At the time of her death, he was working for a refrigeration shop. I think it was kind of, boy, I don't know. I'm thinking it might have been in what we call Koreatown. Now I forget the address, but he was working at a refrigeration company, and that's what he did. He was very mechanical. So that's it. After that, I don't really care. I don't really feel like investing a lot of time in what happened to Cleo Short after Elizabeth Short was. As long as he didn't do it, I don't really care. Again, Cleo Short was apparently a kind of mechanical individual, in that he was in let's see, he worked on ship. He was at Mare Island working on ships. That's what he did. And so he had a mechanical background. And if he was working on refrigeration units and that kind of thing after the war, that's the most that I think he was living. I think he had an apartment on Kingsley Drive. The address, the street Kingsley Drive, sounds kind of familiar. But he was working at some refrigeration shop. And after that, I don't really. Once he was eliminated as a killer, I mean, it's kind of interesting to know what's the rest of the story, but that's kind of it with Cleo. If the birth certificate in her purse was because she went into Mexico while in San Diego, not sure that she went into Mexico when she was in San Diego. We don't know that. She was in San Diego for about. Let me take a running start at that at that question. In the last month of her life, Elizabeth Short went down to San Diego, and she crashed at an all-night movie theater, and that's where she met a woman named Dorothy French. And Dorothy French invited her to come home, and Elizabeth Short stayed with the French family for a month, from sort of early December into early January. And finally, the French family said, "Can you kind of like go?" No. It's actually a really interesting story why she had the birth certificate. There were these two guys from Idaho. They were World War II veterans. They had got back home to Idaho, and they kind of decided, before they settled down to domestic life back in Idaho, that they were going to see Southern California. And so what these guys did was they came down to Long Beach and they got a room at this hotel where Elizabeth Short was staying, where Gordon Fickling had put her up. And so they got to know her. They would hang out with her at the at this drugstore lunch counter where she got the Black Dahlia nickname. They would see her there. They would, I think they went to the beach with her. They came up to Los Angeles, and when you see the really grainy, fuzzy photographs of Elizabeth Short in front of Grauman's, in front of Earl Carroll's, okay, that was all from this one trip with these two guys brought her up to Los Angeles, and I'm not sure, I forget the name of the club they went to. It's been a while since I wrote that part of the book. But they, visited Earl Carroll's and all that kind of thing. And they really tried to persuade Elizabeth Short to come back to Idaho and get a job. There are lots of jobs in Idaho. You could come back. You could come back there. Well, they told her in order to get a job in Idaho, you're going to need a birth certificate. And so they helped her get a birth certificate. So that was what that was all about. Of course, these guys went back to Idaho, and like everybody who interacted with Elizabeth Short, they never heard from her again. I think she wrote them a couple of letters after they got back to Idaho. Maybe she asked for money. Maybe she tended to do that, and that was about it. So that's why she had the birth certificate, is because these guys told her she would need it to get a job. And so that's why she had it. She never went to Mexico. As far as I know, she that in Tijuana, not that I'm aware of, not really. I mean, she tended to habituate drugstore lunch counters and that kind of thing, and she had practically no money. So that's really not something she was going to do. Okay, Rod, what's the status of the book? What did I say at the beginning here? I think it's 147,000 words. I have just finished part one, The Life of Elizabeth Short, and I have moved on to part two, which is the crime investigation. I working on the crime scene as it was in 1947. I interviewed Betty Bersinger and her husband, late husband John, the lady who found the body, and then I interviewed the first police officer on the scene, Wayne Fitzgerald. I interviewed him, and he had some interesting things to say about it. And then anyway, so that's where I am right now. Let's see. I presume Cleo Short didn't say much after his daughter's murder. He seems like that kind of guy. He didn't want to talk to the police. One of the things, I believe it's in Boxie, that Harry Hansen said is they went over to talk to him, and he didn't want any part of Elizabeth Short. He was very uncooperative. He was drunk. There were liquor bottles everywhere. And so he finally showed up and was interviewed by the police, and that was it. There is no reason to believe that that Cleo Short had any idea that Elizabeth Short was back in Los Angeles. They had come down from San Francisco. He was working at Mare Island Navy Yard, which is in the Bay Area. And through very complicated reasons, he and Elizabeth Short came down they borrowed a house from somebody who was up in the Bay, temporarily up in the Bay Area. And they fought the whole time. Elizabeth Short and Cleo fought a lot, and then she just took off. Didn't say goodbye. She just took off for what was then Camp Cook, and is now Vandenberg Air Force Base or Space Force Base or whatever it is. She took off, and he said he was done with her. He didn't want any part of her. He refused to identify her body in the morgue. It's all it's weird. It's odd. It's strange. But did he kill her? No. Spins. Will Fowler said everything Will Fowler said is BS. Will Fowler told me that story. He told me a lot of other stories. Every Will Fowler story that I checked out turned out to be a lie. Okay, who is Will Fowler? Will Fowler was a reporter for the Examiner, and he is in pictures at the crime scene. So you will see him with Harry Hansen and Finest Brown and Ray Pinker. He's there. He's standing on the sidewalk looking at the body and that kind of thing. So yeah, he was definitely there. In later years, he came up with all these tall stories about how he was the first reporter at the crime scene, and he had a picture of the body and nobody was there, but he didn't have the picture now and all that kind of stuff. Well, when I talked to Wayne Fitzgerald, the first police officer on the scene, Wayne Fitzgerald said bullshit about Will Fowler stories. So no, Spins, everything Will Fowler said, you can just discount it. You can just throw it out, except for the fact that he was at the crime scene. He was there. And then he shows up in some pictures from when Phoebe flew in. Elizabeth Short's mother, Phoebe, flew into Los Angeles and then went up to the Bay Area to rendezvous with Virginia and Adrian, and then came back down for the inquest. So Will Fowler was at the airport when Phoebe got in, and he was at the crime scene, that's for sure. But beyond that, he has just embellished it tremendously. So just, if it's got Will Fowler's name on it, and the main thing that Will Fowler's continuing damage to the Black Dahlia cases, one of Will Fowler's stories is that Elizabeth Short had infantile genitalia. No, that is Will Fowler BS. Pretty much anything that comes from Will Fowler, you can just throw out. Forget about it. And I treated Will Fowler like a friend. Will was estranged from his entire family. Nobody would talk to him, and so, I felt sorry for him, but he just lied to me, and so I miffed at him with that. But he lied to everybody. It wasn't just me. I wasn't special. I would take Will to lunch. We would go to the Valley Inn out on Ventura Boulevard, which had been there since the 40s. And he would just tell me lie after lie about the old days. That's just who he was. Let's see. Was any anesthesia found in her system during the autopsy? No. They did find, I think, a slight trace of alcohol, but my understanding is that's what happened when the body starts to decompose. When the body starts to go, they did find a trace of that. More likely is when you read the inquest, or you look at the photos, you'll see she was pasted right across the forehead, really hard. Especially you can see it more than the morgue shots. You can see it in the crime scene photos where they haven't cleaned her up as much. She was walloped really hard in the forehead, and all the cops who were there and saw the body said, just hitting her in the forehead that hard would have knocked her out. So that's my best analysis of what happened, is rather than anesthesia or anything like that, whoever killed her just hit her really hard in the forehead and knocked her out. But she was hit multiple times in the forehead. It wasn't just once, but she was really walloped in the forehead. The boy on the bike. That's another good one. The boy on the bike shows up in only in this 1972 article by Todd. 1970. I'm going to say it's 72. I might be a little shaky on the date. This 1972 article in the Los Angeles Times West magazine, "Farewell, My Black Dahlia." by Todd Faulkner. And who is Todd Faulkner? Todd Faulkner's dad ran a bunch of bingo parlors and whatnot on the Pike in Long Beach. And Todd Faulkner Jr., the guy who wrote the article, was his son. So he supposedly remembered Elizabeth Short from the summer of 1946 when she was living in Long Beach, maybe. But the boy on the bicycle appears only in that article, that magazine article. There's a picture of this guy. Supposedly was the boy on the bicycle. And it's like, yeah, I don't know. I don't think so. I mean, when I interviewed Fitzgerald, and I also have a copy of the report that Perkins and Fitzgerald filed from their arrival at the crime scene, there was nobody there. There was no one there. There were no cars there. There were no people there. And what Perkins and Fitzgerald did, they were in a radio car. They were dispatched to the crime scene looking for a man down on the west side of Norton Avenue. They observed the body. They looked around. There was nobody there. And so they radioed they radioed the sergeant. Sergeant shows up. And then more police officers show up. But, their job was to preserve the crime scene. And so that's what they did. They stood by. And then once other police officers and investigators showed up, Perkins and Fitzgerald said to me, yeah, we left. We did our job and we took off. And let me point out that people say, well, there was no tape at the crime scene. Well, no, the reason there wasn't, they didn't use crime scene tape, but they had rope that they would rope off the crime scene. But what they did instead of roping off the crime scene is they blocked the entire street. If you look really carefully at the crime scene photos, you will see police officers up at the intersection of Norton and I think it's Rodeo. You'll see them. They're not letting anybody in. So the whole street is blocked off. And that's why there's no crime scene tape. Instagram folks, I'm going to say goodbye because otherwise I'll get cut off. So long for now. Yes, end video. Okay. Yeah. So do I think she was held captive during the misting week? It's really hard to say. The most that I got from John Douglas, and again, I was fortunate enough to have a one-to-one conversation interview on his take on the Black Dahlia case rather than the book, which is, again, Cases That Haunt Us is a little shaky. He said, I wouldn't be surprised if the killer and the victim had spent some time together. It wasn't, sometimes you'll see a murder where, it's just a crime of opportunity, or Elizabeth Short was just, representative. No, whoever killed her as Elizabeth Short. They had spent time together. It would seem that way. One of the things they wondered was, if she didn't have access to a change of clothes or anything like that, how did she manage? And her roommate Ann Toth said that Elizabeth Short was very particular about her clothing. She would wash out her things every night. So presumably, that could have happened, but she didn't have anything. She had checked all of her luggage at the bus station. All she had was the clothes on her back and her purse, and that was it. And with that, we are coming up on an hour, and I think that's a good place to cut it off. As always, it's been a lot of fun. The time went fast. The time went fast for me. I hope it went fast for you. And ideally, by next time, I will have the technical gremlins sorted out where I can use it on my camera will talk to my Windows 11 computer, unlike it won't now, and to see if I can resolve this issue where the video on YouTube is skipping. And with that, see you later. Thanks a lot, folks. Take care.